All right, this is what we call the magic of irony. If you ever want a real life example of what is ironic, stay tuned right now. I'm Christopher Story. You're listening to Alaska Matters Radio. Along with me is Mr. David Webb, engineering and producing this program back up at the mothership of KGTL AM 620, FM 100. Don't forget, on December 3rd, this is as important as April 15th, should and ought to be to you, the times of the year where we fall back and spring forward on your clocks. This, likewise, December 3rd, Tuesday, shall be the switch from KGTL. Alaska Matters Radio will not be here anymore. If you tune in to this station on December 3rd, expecting to hear the magic that is Alaska Matters Radio, you'll be by yourself. You've got to follow me to KPEN, 102 FM, 101.7, 99.3. Just travel up and down the dial till you hone in on KPEN, wherever it's best where you are. And so that's December 3rd. That's important because we're going to be going peninsula-wide, South Central-wide on Alaska Matters Radio. It's the inaugural program. We'll have Dr. Ilona Farr as one of our guests, among other noted celebrities around the state. Possibly Sarah Palin. I'm working on that with her people. I'm going to end up with one of two things. Well, one of three things, as I think about it. I'm going to end up with what's called a TRO. It's a temporary restraining order, or an interview with Sarah Palin, or a black eye from Todd Palin. It's going to be one of those three things, and I'm going to get one of them. And trust me, if I get a TRO, it's going to be hung in my studio with pride. If I get a black eye, I'll post it on Facebook. And if I get the interview, well, you'll be hearing it. So I'm excited about that. But let's get back to the magic of irony. So Dr. Paul Annabo, has written a point of view in both papers, actually, Homer Tribune and Homer News of last week, and it's regarding home rule and his caution for the community to enter into this home rule discussion with great caution. And so I wanted to discuss the irony of all things, because here we have Dr. Annabo, who was my doctor. He was my doctor when I was born. He was the one that reached out and grabbed me and did not drop me repeatedly. There may have been a drop, but it was not repeatedly upon my head. This is the man who held me up and he said, "For in my hands I hold greatness." That was Dr. Paul Annabo. Outside the door, outside of the, I don't even know what you call it, the maternity ward, if you will. Why say ward? We apply the word ward to like mental wards, right? Anyway, so the maternity ward, outside of the maternity ward was a janitor who happened to be a Homer City Council person. His name, Brother Isaiah Bates. That Brother Isaiah heard through the door that it was a boy. He went out into the lobby where my father was waiting. Remember, this is 1972, so men aren't necessarily invited in at that point in 1972. So my father's waiting, no doubt, with my grandfather and perhaps another friend or two of his, and my brother, my older brother, of course, probably had a bottle of NyQuil half down and was resting peacefully, as he'd like to do. Anyway, so Brother Isaiah comes out and tells my dad, "It's a boy, brother. It's a boy." And so at that same time, Ken Kastner was petitioning to stop home rule, actually was suing the city of Homer and won in a variety of cases. You can read all about it in either paper. And then, again, Chris Story born. So all four of these people, all four of them, come together and coalesce on a single page of what I like to call the magic of irony. So think about that. So Dr. Annabo is one of the commissioners for home rule. Brother Isaiah is on the city council fighting against the 3-year residency rule. And there's Chris Story being born. At the same time, Ken Kastner is doing his best to make sure that there is no discrimination in the new charter, in the home rule, and fighting. And here we all are today. Of course, Brother Isaiah, may he rest in peace, is with us in spirit in this cosmic hamlet by the sea. And Dr. Annabo is writing pieces to the Homer News and the Tribune regarding caution on home rule. Chris Story is encouraging you to take up the mantle of home rule and discuss it heartily and healthily. And then there's Ken Kastner, who is actually the one who petitioned for home rule. So all in all, it's ironic. It doesn't get any more ironic than that. I want to talk about, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Annabo for not dropping me repeatedly. He didn't actually ever drop me. I shouldn't have said that. So I want to thank him for writing this piece because he's spot on. The point of view is called will home rule charter be worth the effort and cost? There's a question mark. And so what Dr. Enabo does, I think, in this point of view is highlight exactly what you and I ought to be cautious of. And I believe and truly fully agree with Dr. Enabo that we should enter this discussion with a measure of caution. Because as we approach a charter, or what I like to call a constitution, because it really is the constitution with which this community shall grow and go forward. As we approach discussing this, electing commissioners that will write the charter, get involved in this what could be a year-long process, we ought to take a real measure of caution and heed Dr. Enabo's advice. Because if you read this article that he's written, and you read other pieces that have been written recently about home rule, you'll read that it was defeated in large measure due to the fact that it was exclusionary from the start. It excluded anybody who hadn't lived here for 3 years from running for elected office. And that was exclusionary. And when you begin with exclusion and when you begin with discrimination, then you're going to fail. And I think he highlights that point beautifully. So I want to thank him for that. Also, he says it's time to articulate the why. He says Mr. Kastner needs to, and I would say, and others, those that are promoting this, not just Ken Kastner, but Mr. Kastner, he writes, needs to articulate a clear and powerful need for change before we undertake the work, expense, and agony of drafting a home rule charter. Like the sign says, proceed with caution. And I couldn't agree more. It's time to discuss the why. Because with a big enough why, the how long, the how much, all can be answered and all can be absorbed into what is the process of writing a charter if there's a large enough why. So I say two things right off the top. I think you could put this on the back of a business card and call it done. Community solutions outside the courthouse. Can you think of a problem we've had of late that has been solved outside of court? I can't think, and I will, as the program unfolds, give you many examples of where and when we've gone to court needlessly when we could have provided a solution for ourselves, far less expensive, far more community-minded, far more neighborly, and far more equitable for all parties involved. There's a way to do it. We need to write a charter such that we no longer turn to the courts. We no longer turn to the courts at the first step. Of course it may get there, and that's what the courts are for. But why are we inviting litigation? Why is that the first step we take in almost any problem solving that we get into as a city? So we've got to find a way to be peaceful and prosperous in this community and get along. And here's the second part of it, accountability. I say it's time that if we're going to borrow $12 million from ourselves and build out NSTAR's infrastructure and provide natural gas to the community, you deserve a vote. And I don't mean a reverse vote. I don't mean a discriminatory vote. I mean a real vote of the people. And we can write a charter that would require that. We can write a charter that says if we are to build a building, and it's a need, a public building that is proven to be a need, not just a want, but a need, then we have an opportunity to decide how it's paid for, when it's paid for, and by whom, and what will we do prior to getting, say, state funding. Shall we as a people take out $300,000 written on the check of you, on the banking account of you, and spent with engineers and architects and people designing something that may or may not get funded? This all can be put into a charter, and as we make our way forward. So I would say accountability, and I would say community solutions outside the courtroom. Those are two very important and highly, highly important pieces of leverage we can go forward on and grow as a community. So we'll talk about that more. I also have a new feature we're calling Your Money Update, and we've got a new intro to that will make you smile. I promise it will make you smile. Included in today's program is a two-part series on the merger of the century. Diane Francis will join me later in the program. We'll have two parts to this interview. I had a chance to meet with her last week, and I want to bring you this merger of the century, why America and Canada should consider merging and become one. Diane Francis, fascinating woman. Wait till you hear what she has to say about Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. And that you will, my friend. All that and more coming up here on Alaska Matters Radio.
When I was a child and I lived in the city, I dreamed of Alaska so far away, and I dreamed I was flying over mountains and glaciers. Somehow I knew